Part 3 of our tour begins at Queenstown. Our hotel overlooked a small stream running through a pleasant garden setting. At the harbour, we boarded the catamaran Eagle, picked up a tea or coffee, and settled down to a cruise with a running commentary from the skipper. Unfortunately, the noise of the catamaran's motors made it difficult to record much of what was said. We set out from Strawn on Macquarie Harbour through Hell's Gates and back to Sarah Island and a short stop at Heritage Landing on the Gordon River.
So we wish to keep that as we found it, and of course proceed through the gates and out to sea, keeping the channel clear and navigable. But you can still see railway lines listed up amongst the rocks today, and coastal, and it's heading to the state. Sad to lose two lives, I think. Mr. Hooper, he was a lighthouse keeper on the island, in Entrance Island, family man, had a 3-bedroom house. The entrance, could you do it? The gates to hell.
Heading for Hell's Gate, we were soon to pass Bonnet Island Lighthouse, a 6-sided timber structure supporting a light and erected in 1891. Another similar light is found at the harbour entrance.
Well, you can see for yourself now that no amount of dynamite and no amount of construction is really going to make this entrance of the harbour safe and big. Put away with road and rail options. There's quite a few different varieties of pilot whales. There's also the killer whale can be found out that way, not to mention the...
Outside the harbour, we drifted for some time, taking in some of the coastline. The entrance to the harbour was discovered in 1815. The channel through the entrance was given the name Hell's Gate by convicts who considered this to be the entrance to Hell, the penal station on Sarah Island. The channel entrance is shallow and dangerous. Between 1900 and 1902, a breakwater was built and the channel dredged. Parts of the breakwater are still visible.
Some buildings and vegetation can be seen as we cruised slowly along the shoreline of the outer harbour. Cruising back once again, passing Bonnet Light, we stopped at the salmon trout traps, where fishing was in progress. With the motors cut, the skipper was able to treat us to a general commentary on the procedure taking place before us.
Goal has been a fish farm at the harvest period. So what they're doing here is they've crowded the fish up in those cages by using a crowd net. You can see the little floats and the little net there. They've crowded the fish up so they're very close together, almost fit to fin. They dip the fish out by utilising a dip net on the end of a crane. It's called a braille, and you can see it there coming off the end of the crane. It's got about 50 trout in there. He swings the braille over the harvest bench where the fish are mechanically stunned, necked and bled, placed into bins of ice slurry. Now that ice chills the flesh of the fish down very quickly and keeps it in pristine condition for the processing plants to the north and south of the state, where they process these fish as a whole product. They send them around the world, you know, export. Japan, America, they love our trout and salmon, and also around the nation. You could well have seen Tasmanian trout and salmon in your own fish shops, delicatessens or fish markets in the areas. Did I tell you about lunch? They also value add. I mean, you can offer lunch today. You're going to love it because it's freshly made on board by the ladies each day for you to enjoy. Reduce it into a meal and extrude it out.
Leaving the fish traps, we headed upstream, approaching Sarah Island for a guided tour of this penal settlement of the 1820s. On disembarking, we were met by a guide with a South American accent who colourfully told the story of the island as we wandered amongst the ruins.
Aussie name, no? If you are surprised to see someone from South America that speaks Spanish telling you this story here in Australia, well, I hope when we finish the tour that will become very clear. Of Strawn, you can visit the website. It's www, which means wildwindywet.strong.org. Tea, sugar, rum, tobacco. No allow for convicts. Very thick surface. You can appreciate the bricks and stones of the barrack.
Our first visit was to the old lime pit, and from there to the jail and on to several other ruins on the island. A tannery was established in 1824, providing a valuable export as hides and kangaroo skins sent from Hobart were sent to the island for tanning. The bakehouse provided convicts with bread and several other food rations, such as salt beef, wheat, oat and maize meal.
The penitentiary was constructed around a pole frame. The green timbers shrank and let the wind in from the gully. A single file staircase made it easy to count the men when moving them from the muster yard. From Sarah Island we headed up the Gordon River with information about the rainforest supplied by the skipper.
Subtropical, temperate, cannot tolerate fire. One of the conditions of being a rainforest. But if you did get a regeneration of it, 3,000 years for the Huon pine would simply take thousands of years to regenerate. Regenerate to the walk through the forest. You have no appreciation of what goes on below the canopy. This is the forest system. And I want you to share wonderful information about the forest and values it holds.
Eventually, we arrived at Heritage Landing. A light rain had set in now, but we could not resist venturing out for a walk through this part of the forest. Many species of plants were illustrated on boards along the boardwalk so that we could identify what we were looking at as we photographed the flora in the area.
Keep going.
The boardwalk terminated at a section of a 695-year-old Huon pine, specially displayed behind a glass screen. A guide here also held a couple of Huon pine seeds in her hand to demonstrate precisely how small they are.
Back on board the Eagle, we headed out of the Gordon River. The weather had now closed in, so we settled back to enjoy the cruise through Macquarie Harbour, arriving back at Strawn in the mid-afternoon. On the wharf was Morrison's mill, with many samples of Huon pine to be seen and even purchased at great expense. It is not permitted to fell this timber these days, and only Morrisons can harvest the fallen timber in the forest.
Next morning we departed from Queenstown, travelling north to Lake Rosebery. It was overcast and quite misty, but the lake was like a sheet of glass, offering almost perfect reflections of the distant mountain and surrounding landscape. After a quick photo of the lake, we set out again. Our next stop was to be Cradle Mountain to the northeast. Driving through this area of the Western Wilderness, we were to see a number of changes in the landscape. Much of the forest near the road was in the process of being cleared for power lines. Areas of pasture land were also evident, with low, rounded hills in the distance. But in the main, we travelled through forest country, much of which was too close to the road to video.
Not much. I'm a bit disappointed, really.
Cradle Mountain was named by Joseph Fosse in 1826. It is recorded that the first Europeans visited this area in the late 1820s. On arriving at Dove Lake, our view of Cradle Mountain was made enchanting as a light dusting of snow and mist shrouded the peak in a pale touch of sunlight. This is the northern section of the wild Cradle Mountain Lake St Clair National Park.
She actually bought a block of land up here, and the idea was, Gustav said, well, we should build a chalet up here. When we build a chalet, people come all over the world.
We left Dove Lake by minibus and arrived at Waldheim Chalet. Originally built between 1912 and the early 1920s by Gustav Weindorfer, who migrated from Austria to Australia in 1900. The original house had 3 rooms, a combined dining and living room and 2 bedrooms. It was open to visitors back in 1912. Gustav, with his wife Kate, campaigned tirelessly to have the Cradle Mountain area reserved, and this was granted in 1922.
And it just gives you a tiny bit more of the experience along the way as well.
The original chalet, built with King Billy pine, became unsound and was demolished. It was reconstructed in 1976. Streams, moss and lichens abound in this unique forest area.
We knew this beautiful bit of rainforest was here. One of the reasons we chose this site. And so, in order not to spoil this, he got all his timber from across the other side of the site. So he did everything.
Back in the minibus, we were driven slowly through this national parkland to the visitor centre, while the driver provided us with more information about the area.
Holding by the gum trees. It's found its way up in here, and it's attacking these old conifers, sadly. Now, the animals around here, you probably noticed a whole lot of road killage going around Tasmania. I will tell you that 87...
On leaving Cradle Mountain, we travelled northeast to the small township of Sheffield, passing Mount Roland on the way. Sheffield is famous for the large murals painted on many of its buildings. We photographed several which were displayed at a park. These were painted for the Wilderness Gallery International Mural Fest and were the artist's personal responses to a poem to present the past in true picture form.
It was getting late in the afternoon now, and we headed on to Burnie. A quick stop at a beautiful rural setting en route afforded an opportunity to snatch a group photo of our fellow tourists and our coach driver and lady tour guide. Reaching the north coast, we settled back to chat and view the ocean on our right until reaching Burnie, where we were booked into the beachfront Voyager Motel for 2 nights in a room overlooking the ocean.